Just like we were speaking about previously with Social Security and pensions, the longevity comes into play. And that's one of the hardest questions to answer in retirement planning. How long will I live? If people knew that, well, the planning process would be pretty easy. Average stats say that men live to 82, women live to 85, but that's based on the population as a whole. Obviously, the average, it's going to skew one way or another for people. Can people rely on these numbers when it comes to planning?
Well, we have a lot of people. You mentioned Social Security. They'll come into the office and they'll talk about they ran the analysis and determined, they had to live into their mid 70s to break even, and nobody in their family lived past that. So they just want to get their money while they can. When we're developing a plan, what I'm doing is I'm betting on you living a really long time, because I'm only 46, so I plan on being in this business for quite some time. And, if the thought process was I better spend my money or get my money while I can, because I'm not going to live a long time, and then all of a sudden you're sitting across the table from me, you're looking at me, I'm looking at you, and you're past 75 and didn't think you were going to make it. You don't want to be in that situation that you have the concern of, will I outlive my money? So we're going to develop a plan ultimately to make sure that you have the confidence in looking at how long it takes to make sure that your money lasts forever. Chaz, we were at Bowling Green State University. We were teaching a retirement playbook meeting recently. And one of the questions that you asked the audience there, the people that attended class, I think it really stuck with me. You said, how much of your income are you willing to risk? And I was really, that hit me pretty well, because I think it also hit the audience. And I think the overwhelming, resounding answer was none. Mm-hmm. They don't want to risk their income in retirement time. So when we're looking at this, what we're trying to do is develop strategies to make sure that people do not outlive their money in retirement. And the ways that we do that is we look at increasing the amount of reliable income. So reliable income in this case would be like what we talked about early, or with pension. So running a pension maximization strategy, looking at how much you can maximize that pension. Social Security, running an optimization report and making sure that we put you in a situation where you don't face a lifetime penalty, but have the opportunity to try to get the most amount of income, betting on you living a long time. And then the third category is you can always shift money from your risky assets to other assets that would provide more reliable income. That could be some type of fixed rate investment that doesn't have market risk. That could be some form of an annuity that provides an income benefit. There's ways to shift that to have more reliable income. I think the stats that I look at is people have much more peace of mind when they, have much more predictable versus variable income. You'd also want to make sure that you manage your withdrawal rate. Mm-hmm. I know we'll have people that'll come in here and they've saved up a couple $100,000 in a nest egg, and then all of a sudden they're doing things that are way excess of what would be considered a reasonable withdrawal rate, because they see this big lump sum of money. And taking those big excess withdrawals in what you defined as the go-go years can certainly run the risk of outliving your money. You want to monitor and adjust your plan along the way. So just because you did one type of withdrawal strategy one year doesn't mean that you don't need to be adaptive to your personal situation and or the economic market conditions in the future to make sure that you don't outlive your money. So quite a few different things. I know, Chaz, one of the things that you talk to people about, and a solution here, if people are worried about outliving your income, is finding out what are some of the biggest disasters that could blow up a plan. Why don't you talk a little bit about how you stress test portfolios to help them eliminate some of those biggest threats and address the question of making sure that they have a high probability of success to have lifetime income.
Right. So the stress test is just very similar to the way that we describe when people get have medical issues maybe with their heart, and they have a stress test on their heart. What my understanding is that doctors are trying to find out where and how much can the heart really sustain? What's the maximum power before things start shutting down? And I kind of liken that to the financial plan and your financial investments. We want to know worst case scenario, what can we accomplish with what we have? And if things go wrong, for instance, longevity, if we live 5 years too long, does that change the probability of success materially? what if the markets don't give us everything that we want? What if we're shooting for a 5 or 6% rate of return, but on average, the markets only gives us 2 or 3? We saw that during the lost decade, that the market from 2000 to 2010 really didn't do anything. It doesn't happen often, but what if we enter one of those periods of time? And then the big one in the room is the inflation factor. How long is, what does a dollar really buy us 5, 10 years from now? And so the planning process, again, I always come back to that. Maybe I'm a little partial because I'm, part of the planning department here, but I go back to the analogy all the time, is that how difficult would it be to get a plane up into the air and to get you from point A to point B if you didn't have a flight path or a flight plan? That doesn't mean we're not going to deviate from it. And so what the stress test does is it shows us how far off course some of these risks can knock us off and have us still get to our destination pretty comfortably and within, a reasonable amount of time and effort. And so that's, generally what the stress test is, Nolan, is we'll talk about what really keeps you up at night, and that's generally the question that I'll ask somebody. Which one of those are you more susceptible to? And then also, it's a combination. Are there 1 or 2 things that maybe inflation and longevity that you're concerned about? And we can address all those or combinations of specific stressors in your financial plan on the fly, really, in our financial planning stress test session.
So when I ran this analysis and I looked at it in my own account here, when I first developed this stress test and looked at the plan, inflation was the biggest risk for me. I think probably because I'm 47 and eating away and decreasing my probability of success. Number 2 was followed by a market drop immediately. Now, the great thing about that is knowing that information, I was able to go in and make modifications to the plan, and I was able to take my probability of success from 68% up to 95 plus percentile.
Wow.
So if you don't know what your probability is, knowing that number and then knowing what specific steps is going to be a much better way to be able to figure this out. And that's exactly what we can do for those of you that are worried about outliving your income, is let us stress test your plan and share with you our decades of experience on how to eliminate or reduce dramatically those risks and increase your probability of success.
If you know what challenges you're up against, it's much easier to take them on, how you can approach them and hopefully counteract those, take on that longevity risk, which seems like a silly thing to say, but as you get later on in your years, if you no longer have any money in your retirement accounts, it can actually become a problem. So having that stress test done is a good way to know what challenges you may face and then also develop a plan to address them. 419-794-3030 if you'd like to have your portfolio stress tested. 419-794-3030, or you can always go to the website and schedule a time as well, arhq.com.